All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Connected Commerce Council's Views from Capitol Hill webinar. My name is Rob Gretzloff, and I am the Executive Director of the Connected Commerce Council, and I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today for this very important and especially timely webinar. We've got a fantastic program in store for you today where we'll get to hear from policy experts on discussing issues lawmakers in Congress to consider this year, and what we can expect with the new Congress in 2023, given the recent developments from this year's midterm elections. We've also got a great lineup of small businesses joining us here today for what will be an exciting panel discussion to talk to us about their experiences as digitally driven small business leaders who will share their perspectives on legislation that was considered by Congress this year and why they decided to get involved to become small business advocates. As we all know, this year brought many challenges and uncertainties for the small business community, making it especially difficult to grow and thrive as American entrepreneurs. Additionally, some lawmakers in Congress this year led a forceful effort to completely rewrite American competition laws that would have created major unintended consequences, upending the digital economy and harming small businesses and startups along the way. Over the last year, 3C has published several research studies and reports to help shed light on small business sentiments and highlight the effects of Congress's proposed legislation. To give you an example, a study by a Dartmouth professor of economics found that a bill in Congress called the American Innovation Choice Online Act would cost American small businesses roughly $500 billion in sales if passed into law, amounting to approximately $1,700 each small business would lose in sales each month over a 5-year period of time. Now, I know that's a pretty staggering number, but as we look ahead to the new year with the new Congress, it is absolutely critical policymakers at the federal, state, and local levels prioritize small business issues in order to help foster a sound and stable business environment. This includes working together to cultivate policies and initiatives that consider and respect the interests of today's small businesses, which is why we're delighted to host this webinar today for you. Digital tools and online platforms are empowering small businesses to grow and succeed. And as we enter a new year, it is imperative for policymakers not to disrupt the digital ecosystem with poorly thought out legislation and harsh regulations that could have significant unintended consequences to the small business and startup community. With that being said, if you do have any questions during this webinar, please do submit them using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll take some time after the small business panel to answer them. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's program, Heatha Herzog. Heatha is the Chief Research Officer at H-Squared Research, a data-driven research firm for registered investment advisors and a Data Catalyst Institute Fellow. She's a columnist at Newsweek and Vogue India, covering retail and consumer spending, and she's had numerous television appearances as a national retail and consumer spending expert for ABC News, Good Morning America, Fox Business, and HLN. The list goes on and on. Heatha, welcome to the program, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Rob. And I want to welcome everyone to this incredible webinar. I wanted to give you a big number, and that's 32 million. That is how many small businesses exist in the United States. And those small businesses, all of you have a voice. And this is one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this webinar together, so we can get an idea of what is going on in terms of policy and hear from you what type of questions you may have. So I want to bring in our first two speakers. They are Jake Ward. He is the founder and chairman of the Connected Commerce Council and the founder and CEO of Data Protocol, a developer education platform that teaches, trains, and certifies software builders in responsible data management. Matt Shears is the president of the Computer and Communications Industry Association, an international nonprofit advocacy organization which represents information and communications and technology industries. Welcome to the two of you. I'm very excited that you all are here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm going to just start in with our first question. And I think it's been top of mind, given that we've just had an election a couple days ago. What are some of the issues that Congress has considered this year when it comes to tech policy and that small businesses in our audience definitely need to know about?
Matt, I'll take this off the bat if you don't mind.
Not at all.
At the outset of the Congress 3 years ago, when the Connected Commerce Council was formed, antitrust seemed to be the Hindenburg on the horizon for much of the technology policy issues, but also for small businesses. The Connected Commerce Council was founded to specifically mobilize and defend against an overactive Congress that, if they had nothing better to do, would start talking about antitrust and technology issues as if they existed in a vacuum. Thank God we did, because in this past Congress, antitrust legislation and proposals from the House, from the Judiciary Committee, as well as the Senate, became the focal point of much of the 2022 legislative calendar.
So where do these issues stand now that this current Congress is coming to an end during this legislative session?
So I think if I can grab this one, at present, nothing has actually been enacted. There has been a considerable amount of discussion around competition policy proposals, including the ones Jake mentioned. Nothing got across the finish line, but there still is a lame duck period, as we say, the final session of Congress. So at least in theory, before the end of the year, there could be legislative action on these issues, and for all the reasons and more that Jake identified, I think Congress would be ill-considered to take these up again, but it still could happen. That being said, there's a number of other items, just regular business, appropriations, end-of-year funding issues, and so on, that are going to compete for time. So the likelihood of things, happening between now and the end of the year is I'd say less than earlier, but it's still a serious concern. And critical legislation could get stapled on to like must-pass appropriations, and that could have a considerable impact, on small businesses who depend on a lot of the services that Congress is trying to essentially redesign in some of these bills. And it's worth noting that even some of the proponents of these bills have acknowledged that they're not ready for prime time, but there's a lot of pressure for Congress to get some stuff off the launch pad when this was perhaps a less productive session.
And you're absolutely right. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was just going to say that we also saw a remarkable thing happen over the past 18 months. Organizations like CCIA and Matt's team, as well as the Connected Commerce Council, were there as a resource for tens of thousands of small businesses that directly engage with policymakers for the first time. And the lack of traction for bad ideas poorly executed is a reflection of that engagement. And it proves to some degree that Congress can still work, right? That it is still a representative body when they hear from the constituents, when they hear from job creators and the economic driver of the country, particularly in the aftermath of COVID, that they listen. And that's why Senator Klobuchar's competition bill isn't law today, and why none of the 5 terrible ideas coming out of House Judiciary were not passed in totality.
And that amplification is so important, especially when it comes to small business and small business advocacy. Now, we don't have, it seems like it's a long time, but towards the end of the year, it's quite short, given that, the holidays are coming up. But let's look ahead to 2023. What are the types of policies that are on board that especially that small businesses need to be aware of?
Yeah, so let me take that if I could. So briefly, it's entirely possible that these competition-rooted bills could come back. That the proponents will try to reintroduce these proposals, and that's problematic because the approach of this legislation, trying to mandate that companies can't offer integrated services, whether that's productivity and messaging or maps and search, or would be very difficult, not only for the digital sector, but a lot of the small businesses that use those tools to reach their audiences or their consumers or advertisers who are using them. And so that fight is going to continue into the new year. In addition to that, I think it's likely that we're going to see a lot of discussion about the topic of content moderation, which is sort of the umbrella term that we use to talk about when digital services moderate or take action to problematic content on their services, and that's going to be a discussion not only in Congress but in the courts and potentially in the states. And I think we can expect to hear a lot about that, because even though there's going to be narrow majorities in both chamber, these are all subjects that are that members have indicated they have a lot of interest in.
I think perhaps, Matt, it's because we have narrow majorities in each chamber, and there's only a handful of issues that both Republicans and Democrats can agree upon, and one of them is they don't think the internet is fair, and that the idea of a commercial internet where people get to also engage with other people doesn't make politicians particularly happy. CDA 230, or content moderation, is absolutely going to be the top issue coming out of both the House and the Senate in the first quarter of this legislative session, if for no other reason than they can't agree on anything else.
Yeah, that's certainly true. That it's the one point of consensus is that the digital services are too favorable to the other guy, which is, doesn't work, but that seems to be a shared view. Of course, the CDA 230 that you referred to, Jake, or what we sometimes think about as the internet's don't shoot the messenger rule, is what allows digital services and platforms to engage in moderation on their sites and ensure that they deliver on the commitments they made to users, that they protect them from everything from Russian misinformation to extremism to hate speech and fraud, and all of that is what services can do because of the protections of Section 230. But there seems to be an increasingly a desire to use that as a political cudgel and sort of work the ref, if you will, by certain political constituencies. That's unfortunate, because small businesses have been catapulted into greatness precisely because they got their start using these small, often free to the user services.
And I was going to say,
for the thousands of small businesses that are on the line today, if this sounds like it's too much academic or it doesn't really affect you, it's the idea of trickle down liability, right? That there will be a end of the tail from platforms to small businesses and partnerships all the way down through. There will be a chilling effect of growth, and certainly the liability that all of you will take on.
And Jake, you hit it right on the head. As a small business owner, so much of my personal growth and my business growth came from the development interaction with my potential customers. And when you're a small business owner, you're certainly wearing a lot of hats. And this is one of those policies that could, to your point, it trickles down. It could have a major impact on your business. And it's always great to understand exactly how this policy works. So you could, as a small business owner, one, be aware, but then understand how to take action so that you can protect your business and make sure that all of your assets are covered when it comes to your customers and your obviously your products. So I want to thank both of you for giving us the down low on policy and really explaining what is going on in Congress right now. You're going to come back for a Q&A in just a little bit, but I also want to introduce some of our small business owners who are incredible, and you're going to hear right from their sources of what they've gone through and what they've done to help build their businesses. So let me bring them in here, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their bios and how they got started. We have Jenna Ahern. She's founder and CEO of Garden Owl Digital, and that's based in Louisville, Kentucky. We have Harold Hughes. He's founder and CEO of Bandwagon Fan Club based in Greenville, South Carolina. We have Angel Johnson. She's founder and CEO of Iconi, and that's based in Denver, Colorado. And then we have Taide Aborto. He is CEO of the Hispanic E-commerce Chamber in San Diego, California. Welcome to you all. Some of you I've met in the past in person and digitally. I'm very excited to see you all again. Let's go down just around the room, I guess, in this virtual room. And I'd like you all to give us your brief intro of who you are and how you got started with your business.
Yeah,
I'll take the lead. Go ahead, Harold.
Oh no, I'm from the South. You have to go first. I love it. Well, I'm from Louisville. We're not too far.
No.
So I'm Jenna Ahern. I'm the owner of Guardian Owl Digital and Go AI, and we specifically help businesses generate new customers through the means of digital tools. So we are a digital marketing agency, and everything that we're talking about here directly affects our clients as well as us. I got started in 2013 solely utilizing tools like Google Ads, Facebook, YouTube, and for an entrepreneur in a completely bootstrap business, this certainly will have the trickle down effects that Matt and Jake were discussing.
Harold.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I'm Harold Hughes. I am a remote CEO. My company is headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, but I'm based in Austin, Texas. And one of the things I think about is building a tech company. We're venture backed. We started out bootstrapped, but then we raised outside capital, just understanding the data points that are necessary to gain the capital you need to scale your company. And so, to simplify this, it really comes down to build or buy. Most all of us are thinking through that with everything we do. For every small business that's on this line right now, some of you decide, are we going to buy price tags or are we going to handwrite them? That's build or buy. And so in my tech company, we have to figure out what of the technologies that we need are we going to build with our small team and our lack of resources, or are we going to leverage free tools like Google, like social media platforms like Salesforce and HubSpot. A lot of these different companies have had. And so by being able to make that decision, build or buy, it's allowed us to allocate our resources where they need to go and move much faster to get to this point.
It's so important. You're absolutely right. And the bootstrapping, I think all of us, again, as small business owners, know exactly what that entails. Angel.
Hi, my name's Angel Johnson. I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina. My business, Iconi, is a motivational and inclusive activewear line based in Denver, Colorado. I've used digital tools since the beginning. This is what allowed me to get my brand out to people, because I started my business in January 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. And then the digital tools have allowed people to find me. So in our first year of business, Iconi was in Oprah's favorite things, and without digital tools, they would have never found us.
We're going to get into the use of digital tools and how that is so important. I want to bring in Haide too, to tell us exactly how he got started as well.
Hi, everyone. Haide Aburto in San Diego. So I started the Hispanic Chamber of E-Commerce in 2008, because at that time I realized that a big segment of the small business population didn't have an active participation in the digital economy. So we created the Hispanic Chamber of E-Commerce with the idea of helping small businesses to survive and thrive in the digital economy by providing them access to the resources, the knowledge, the networks that they needed to understand on how to leverage this important tool as a business owner. And also, like, we saw the importance of creating this organization, because the better the small businesses do, the better the economy thrives. So that's why we have invested thousands and thousands of hours and resources since 2008, helping over 15,000 small businesses to have an active participation in the digital economy.
And it's so important that advocacy, excuse me, again, we're going to get into it a little bit more. And these stories of starting the business, bootstrapping it, such iconic brands, especially being mentioned by Oprah. I mean, that's everyone's dream, right? To as a small business, just to get the stamp of approval from Miss Winfrey, and you got it. And we're going to get into that a little bit more of how that changed your business. But I want to also ask you, and we'll just go around the room again, how, in terms of advocacy, when did you first become an advocate for small business and small business administration when it comes to Tade? We want to, it's so important as a small business to obviously advocate for yourselves and the business, but also for the community. So Jenna, I'm going to start with you. When did that advocacy occur for you?
Well, I mean, there's an old saying that if you don't have a seat on at the table, you're probably on the menu. So about a few years ago, when I watched, especially being in the search engine marketing realm and machine learning really being inserted into these platforms, we recognized as a team, okay, this is going to shake some things up, not just for businesses, but on the legislation side. And then when it came to privacy and everything that you're hearing in the news, we started to really get involved in our local Chamber of Commerce about a year ago, learned about 3C, got connected. And so it really was just a gradual walk into advocacy. It started with a little bit each week. And now, obviously we're all on this webinar together. So I think just being a part of digital marketing certainly helped catapult my interest directly into this cause.
And Angel, I don't mean to use Oprah-isms or cliches, but what was that aha moment for you when you realized advocacy was something you needed to be a part of? And was there a turning point for you?
I really think it was earlier this year. So this year is the first year I feel like I really put myself out there as a business owner, people getting to know me because I'm a very private person. And just my entrepreneurial journey, I was like, people really want to hear about this. And they turned out they did. So I connected with 3C this year and met with my senators a lot this year. I've so many trips back and forth from Colorado to DC. And I think also I noticed advocacy was important because I just started my business in 2020, and our politicians need to be hearing from advocates that just started their business, because sometimes when people are too far removed from their initial start, they don't recognize the little challenges that they had to overcome. And I don't want anyone to make the same mistakes I made when I first started.
Harold, when you started becoming an advocate, was there something that you saw having bootstrapped your business to suddenly getting outside funding that made you think you needed to be an advocate? Were the two experiences different, or did advocacy come at a nascent stage and you decided to kind of move through that as your business grew?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been pretty built into how I'm wired. As a person who acknowledges like the challenges I deal with as a Black founder, as a founder that didn't go to an Ivy League school, who didn't, work at one of the FANG companies, who didn't have a really wealthy background or any of those things. It was building outside of Silicon Valley. I understand the disadvantages, but I still have an immense amount of privilege. And so I'm trying to figure out how I leverage that privilege to help other people. And so one of the things we just realized from the very beginning was that, many of you on the line here may be running your own business where you put your own capital in, but there's a certain segment of the country that's building these larger venture scale companies, and the statistics for Black founders getting funded is abysmal. Let alone Black women, and the numbers are even crazier, which is wild because Black women have created more businesses than any other group in the country over the last decade. And so for us, it was really important to try and think through, how do we make sure that we're not getting screwed on the funding and losing access to resources that help us build our business. It's like you're getting squeezed from both sides, so we can't lose the free tools and resources while also not getting the capital at a rate to our peers, and then to also expected to deliver better than returns. And so it was important to be loud from the very beginning for me.
This is a really important point, because the statistic or the number that I threw out at the beginning of this call was 32 million. And that is small business owners, but so much of that population, that percentage of small business owners, do not have a voice. They feel underrepresented. And to your point, Harold, that I think is a running theme through a lot of small business owners that I speak to. Now, Taide, you made it a point to be an advocate for underrepresented businesses or people that felt that they didn't have a voice. What was the turning point for you that made you really feel like you had to stand up and be an advocate?
As a business owner, I realized at a very early stage in my entrepreneurial career that it was important to be an advocate and with our elected officials and stuff. So being an advocate is how you make your voice heard and how you can influence policy. And if you want a better small business environment, talk to your member of Congress or their staff. And organizations like Connected Commerce Council are here to help you do that. They have the resources and the connections, so don't feel like you are alone in the marketplace. And as someone that has worked closely with a lot of small businesses, I'm always telling them to get involved. And we have several important issues coming up next year that will matter greatly to small businesses and their futures. So now's the time to step up that and let lawmakers, know that you are ready to fight for the best interests of your business. It's important. And we have upcoming local, state, and federal elections. We just had a few last Tuesday. So please get involved and make sure that at the next town hall meeting or when you have a Q&A with candidates, ask them about what their stand is in regards to the digital economy, because it is important that we advocate for small businesses in the digital economy, because a great future of our businesses and our economy at the national level depend on that.
Fighting and protecting is kind of secondhand now. It's like in our blood, in our souls as small business owners. I'm going to turn to Harold for a second, and I want to hear how you really advocated to protect your business. You have an incredible story, and how can other small businesses learn from you and what you've learned kind of going through that path and that journey?
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that I always disagreed with when it comes to like entrepreneur advice is that most people say like, never give up, don't quit. And I think that is ridiculous advice. If you do that, that means you either A, have a bunch of privilege and a bunch of like safe landing spots to where you can do it all, and if it doesn't work out, you didn't lose too much. I think it's important to have a line. That has helped me understand very clearly, what am I willing to risk? What am I willing to lose? And then from there, as you get closer to that line, you can think about this as, Icarus flying close to the sun. As you get closer to that line, you understand you have to make changes to survive and for your business to survive. But as an entrepreneur, I know that I'm thankful to be able to do this. There's a lot of folks that have to be an entrepreneur out of necessity. And those folks have a different line, and it's really important for us to make sure that they have those resources. But for me, in my personal journey, it's been a matter of, can I have a line and make sure I'm sticking to it and be okay evaluating what decisions look like as you get more data. I definitely agree that once you get data, it's okay to change your mind. But at the same time, I don't want people to put themselves in such a position that they risk everything and hurt their family or create a bigger problem down the road. So that's definitely helped me kind of stay focused and navigate some really, really challenging times, especially running a live event business at the time during COVID.
So making sure that you're realistic as a small business owner too. I think so many of us get, advice from outside sources, but we're not taking into consideration what maybe those influences of those outside sources are making them say what they're saying. And you're absolutely right. I always say to everyone that we're all individuals, and especially when it comes to small businesses. Jen, I love this line about sitting at the table. You need to take a seat at the table. But what if that's difficult for small businesses? How can small businesses really take that step, especially when there are so many layers that small business owner is thinking about? But knowing that policy advocacy is so important.
We're all busy, right? We all have something to do in the next minute, right? Or a fire to put out. So I think that it is very critical that we make the time, and that's non-negotiable. I think it's more about prioritizing this and prioritizing your advocacy. And again, just starting small. You don't have to, go out and make a big plan for 2023. It could just start with an email to your Chamber of Commerce. How can I get involved? Sitting on a webinar, right? Take an hour of your time a week and try and digest how this is going to impact you, your business, or even your clients that you serve. So again, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. So I believe small businesses, not just they don't have to make the time to be an advocate for themselves right now. They really have to prioritize it here in the next 12, 24 months. And our challenges as small business, whether you're funded by venture capital or you're bootstrapped, typically our margins are smaller, right? And I loved what was said earlier about sometimes you forget if you're 10, 20 years in, what it's like starting out those first couple years. And there's so many businesses that are launching every day that are utilizing these tools at a very practical level to launch their business as well as gain visibility. And so I don't think that it should be as easy for policymakers to just overlook these concerns. And we have to prioritize making our voices heard, again, even if it's just starting small.
Starting small is so important. That could even mean making a phone call to your local representative or writing a letter to your mayor, even making time for a meeting with your local mayor or policymaker within your communities. I think we forget that you're absolutely right. Just taking that small step, it doesn't need to be, these grand, let's try to get the president on the phone type big steps. It's act locally for major impact. And Angel, you actually did that. You sat with some of the, your local representatives and talked to them about small business advocacy. What were some of the takeaways from those meetings?
I think the biggest takeaways they are definitely willing to listen. I'm very blessed to be in Colorado. This state just thrives off of entrepreneurship and small business. But Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett, they were both, and their staff were very receptive to the feedback I had. They had so many questions because when you get further removed, and they're super busy people, they forget some of the smaller issues, and we just have to bring it back up to them. So some of the takeaways we had are for Denver and the Aurora areas. Hey, why doesn't the small business development site have all the resources? Why does it link you to other sites? Why is that not your go-to? Why is that not the Bible for small business? Why, when someone files an LLC, we not tell them the list of free resources they can tap into in the Denver, Aurora area? So some of those were the takeaways, and it felt refreshing just to hear like my policymaker say, oh, I didn't realize that. That's definitely something we can fix. And just like Jenna said, you can get caught up into a lot of stuff as a small business owner, and you don't realize, but it's on you to really just take a step back and think like, hey, everything I do there may be a policy associated with it. Just let me take a step back and think about how a policymaker could help me right now. It could be like grant funding and who gets grants. Like one of my biggest pet peeves was, hey, when we get government grant funding, why do you need 5 employees? What makes a business with 5 employees versus 4 employees?
Interesting. And so that was a point that wasn't even, it just was that differentiation that you were able to clarify a little bit more. And I also love this example of user experience, because I think we also forget that is part of advocacy too. I can't tell you how many times days I've spent just hours trying to find one little thing on a website, and it becomes really frustrating. And, if it took a meeting just to make that small fix in Denver, and let's not sleep on Denver. Denver is a big city, and Colorado for the, in that sense, then you can also, small businesses that are on here listening to us can make that same change. I want to bring in Taide just for a second to talk about advocacy when you feel like your voice is marginalized or you don't really have a voice. So quickly, Taide, can you tell us, you deal with so many small business owners, some are Spanish speaking and maybe are bilingual. How do you make sure that those voices are amplified in a way that they feel comfortable with?
Yeah, that is something that we've been trying to work on over the last few years, trying to get as many small businesses involved in policies that matters to them, especially on the digital side, because that's kind of like the focus of our organization. But for me, it's very frustrating when we have this big group of entrepreneurs trying to survive and thrive in the marketplace, And then you have policymakers that have very little understanding of how hard it is to start a business, how hard it is to run a business. And then on top of that, they want to add additional red tape that just make things a little more complicated. We don't have enough jobs in the marketplace that can be taken by every American. So they need to understand that small businesses are the backbone of our economy. So we are trying to provide the tools and the resources for the Spanish speaking and non-Spanish speaking, business owners in general, to understand like how important it is to get involved in policies that are going to affect them sooner than later. So on the Spanish side, we try to do the best that we can, Hita, to get them involved, but it's a very challenging task, just because of some of the things that you mentioned earlier, that oftentimes these small businesses are so engaged in the daily activities that they don't pay attention to future policies that can affect them. But through the work that Connected Commerce Council and other organizations are doing, we have to get them more involved so that trend starts to change.
Again, it's all about amplifying that messaging and making sure that people are using their voices to talk about what they need. We have a couple more questions for you all, and I think we're just going to do it sort of rapid fire. So if someone wants to take this question, I think this is really important. Jake and Matt, we're talking about congressional policies that are coming down the pipeline and into 2023, especially when it comes to antitrust bills currently in Congress. How is that going to impact your business? And I'm just going to open it up to you all if someone wants to take that question.
I can start there. I mean, a lot of what we do as a tech company is thinking about data and thinking about how that information is being used. And so as these companies are getting bigger and bigger, I think it's important to make sure we're sharing the resources that we need as a small business and using that information in a de-identified way, that we're using it in the way we say we are going to. And so for us, thinking through GDPR, and CCPA, those are really, really important. We pride ourselves on that customer privacy balance. There are ways you can use de-identified data, so not using my first name, last name, email address, and still creating something that's unique and curated for us. And so as you see more of these types of conversations continue with antitrust, I know that's something that we have to watch as a tech company. And I think that if we are intentional about how data is being used, stored, and shared, I think that we can really prevent a lot of challenges down the road.
Angel, I'm going to ask you this question because you've been in it and you've taken the meetings and saw your questions and needs met through change. How important is it? I know Jenna alluded to this, but just to take the first steps, as we all mentioned, small business owners are very busy, but just what would be a small first step or second step just to start this advocacy? And again, in your terms, why is it so important?
A small step would just be looking at your policymakers' stance on different small business issues, something that specifically affects your business, whether you have a service-based or a product-based business, and then writing them a letter or making a phone call to their office. And because they may ask, like one of the members of their staff may ask, hey, can you come in? I actually want to know more about this. And it may be surprising, but they definitely want to hear your voice. And I think it just takes that one step.
And I think it's interesting too, because even if it's 30 minutes a week, that 30 minutes can lead to bigger things. We all have 30 minutes somewhere, even if it's maybe late at night, but we could carve out some of that time to just make that small step happen. One last question for you all. And just in terms of Congress and other policymakers, what do you have in terms of advice for when they meet with small businesses? If your elected official was here today, what would you say? Or what would you want to ask them?
I mean, I'll take this. I think that obviously availability to talk to them and for their education on some of these digital tools like Amazon, Google, and how they're helping small business owners. Them understanding that, I think, is huge. And every issue in today's economy feels like a small business issue. So I think considering how these laws and regulations are going to impact these small business owners in their state or community, clearly there's a gap between, big tech and small business owners. But how is this going to impact the small business owners in your community? Is it going to make it more expensive? Yes. Are they going to be able to integrate tools like Google Analytics and ads seamlessly? No. So these are major things that are going to impact a day-to-day small business owners or small business owner.
And really understanding that policy. I know sometimes the political jargon gets a little overwhelming, but as much as you possibly can understand it, and then ask questions. If there's something that you don't understand as a small business, I always say to people, you know what, there's no harm in asking questions. I think I say this to my toddler 4-year-olds too. They just turned 4, but I say there's no stupid questions. Just understanding and asking so many questions just gives that breadth of understanding. So you could be a better advocate as well. We are going to open up the floor for Q&A. I'm going to bring back Jake and Matt here. And we are, let's see, there they are. Welcome back, you guys. We have a couple questions here, and here's one from someone that owns a day spa in California. The question is, what do I need to know about these policies and how they affect me? Do you have examples of how it'll affect my business and any recommendations for protecting my business now and in the future? I'm going to throw that over to Jake.
Thank you. It's a good question. That's why we're here today, right? It's to talk about the actual ramifications of what could otherwise feel like policymakers doing something thousand miles away. If you run a day spa in California, you have a couple of expenses right now that are related to platforms. There's no question that you're probably using QuickBooks to do your books. You're using Google's suite to run email and maybe manage some of your Excel components. You may be using MailChimp or another piece to manage marketing components, stuff like that. Certainly a website. All in all, your monthly overhead is probably $150 to $200, depending on how many people you have on staff and what you're using those things for. If you start taking away the revenue streams for platforms, if you start increasing liability, if you start changing the model that has created that opportunity for you, you change the math, and those services will become more expensive. The tiering and structure around them will force them to charge you more money because they will in turn be taking on more responsibility. The scale and security that you have counted on to build around that, what we call the small business data stack, the small stack, is no more, right? It just goes away, it changes, and that's not beneficial to anybody. Around content moderation, the CDA 230 that Matt and I were talking about earlier, if you have a review component on your site, if people are allowed to give you 5 stars and review a service, the liability for moderation of that service is almost certainly being outsourced to somebody else, Yelp, etc. There's going to be issues related to how that content is moderated. There will be questions about pricing. There will be questions about what content can be taken down, what can be promoted, what you can do with it. All of it becomes your responsibility in a way that you have no interest in dealing with.
And just, to echo Jake too, if Google Ads and analytics are forcibly broken apart, that data that helps you target your customers, that means missed business opportunities. So obviously pile on the expenses. Now we also have missed business opportunities from these.
So it's crucial to understand exactly how this is working. And on that kind of topic as well, I'm going to send this over to Angel and Taide. How is antitrust going to affect our business? This is another question that just came through, that use Google products like business profiles and Google Ads. How would it affect search? And are there other impacts on business that use Amazon. Angel, do you want to take it, and then Tide can take it?
So my business is 40% on Amazon. 40% of our sales come through Amazon. So when I first heard about antitrust legislation, I was very worried because I want to know how Amazon is going to take that legislation and then apply it to small business. Because a lot of people are like, oh, Amazon, they have so much money. But 45% of the businesses that you buy from on Amazon are small to medium-sized businesses. So we're worried about how they could possibly break up Amazon.com into one for third-party sellers and then one for Amazon Basics and Amazon Essentials. So that's a way that Amazon sellers could be affected. We're like monitoring that very closely to see, because again, that would be, and then Amazon ads would also be affected. So would I be allowed to advertise on Amazon's side of the house versus the third-party site? And then how many people are going to buy from the third-party site, Amazon.com/whatever third-party people, versus Amazon Essentials and Amazon Basics?
There's so many policies that are coming through the pipeline that could have such a major impact on how small businesses do business online. And I want to pull in Jake and Matt to answer this next question, because it's so specific. But do lawmakers understand that the bills they worked on this year will hurt small businesses rather than help?
No. The short answer is no. The longer answer is some of them we have spoken with, they have talked to small businesses, they understand that that is a very real possibility. They either deny it like gravity, or they pretend that it doesn't matter, that the small businesses will find a way around it. But unfortunately for many members of Congress, no, they simply don't understand the nature of an interconnected digital environment where the economy, you know what they do? They confuse permanence with sustainability, ubiquity with sustainability, that they think that because something is widespread, it is permanent. And that has led to questions around antitrust. Facebook's too big, it has to be chopped down. I think the market's doing that for us, right? Like, the Twitter has too loud a voice. We can't allow that company to be that influential in the marketplace. Has anybody turned on a TV lately? Like, the market does what it does. And we think that because everybody carries a cell phone and because this is so ubiquitous in our life, that there's a real permanence to this, and it's just not real. The innovation will continue to drive platforms, finding customers and delivering value, continue to win the day. And policymakers, as we often say, the gears of policy and innovation don't often mesh, right? Policy just moves so slowly that if they accidentally get it right every once in a while and those gears line up, great. But in the meantime, the industry writ large has to do some policing on its own, and market forces like small businesses deciding which platforms they're going to use, which tools they're going to invest in, takes care of that. The market will always dictate who's winning.
Sorry, I'm going to, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We just have a couple more questions that I want to get to because I want to make sure that we're staying on time. But I mean, Jake and Matt, I could talk to you forever about this, and maybe we should just do a specific webinar with you two. So
we'll just stay on the Zoom.
Okay, we're just staying on the Zoom, exactly. But I might have you on here for the next 3 hours discussing this. So just a heads up if we end up staying here. Harold, really quickly, how do you, on the policy note, there's so much going on. How do you stay up to date? You're in Austin. Do you get like a download of everything that's happening in DC specific to your policy? Do you have an assistant that's specifically looking at this stuff? How do you, as a small business, especially when you're bootstrapping, just be on top of it?
Yeah, fortunately, being in South Carolina as a headquartered company, South Carolina is actually really great for small businesses. One of the things we have that most states in the country don't have is an angel tax credit which allows angel investors to invest in our companies and be able to get a tax break for it. And so the organizations that help support those types of initiatives are like SCRA, or SC Launch, South Carolina Research Authority. And so they actually create a lot of material and education that they share. There's monthly webinars and newsletters. And so a lot of that comes to us where, our investors and stakeholders are able to help. So fortunately, they are parroting it back from us. We don't have to worry about them translating it or trying to put a lens to it. We're able to distill it down pretty well as entrepreneurs, but being able to receive it all in a digest really helps a lot.
I'm going to just ask Ty-Day to answer the specific questions since you're based in California. A small business owner from the West Coast asked, are there opportunities for me to meet my congressman without having to travel?
I'm pretty sure because most congressmen, they have local offices, they have local representation. So just go to their website and they'll find out where they are located. And if they are not there, most of the times they have staff that you can talk to and they can help you out. So make sure that you reach out to your local elected officials and let them know your concerns and the things that you care about for your small business.
And speaking
You can
of
also,
officials, I just want to ask this one quick question, Jake. Are there ways of people able to get out there without having to travel, specifically going to an elected official? Like what levels of social media or advocacy comes from social media and voice amplification? And Jake, if you want to take that, that's fine.
Yeah. So one of the things that 3C did we started doing during the pandemic was hosting roundtables, virtual roundtables with policymakers, using Zoom, using whatever platform, and doing combinations of in-person and video. We also do what we call digital apprentice days, where we can get small businesses together with their policymakers so that they can get a look at what, one of the real challenges, right, is a digital business looks and feels a lot like a not digital business now. The only issue is what you do with your computer, whether you take it home with you or you leave it at the office. And the vast majority of policymakers don't even use computers. It's a real challenge. And so we try to ground those guys in a real world experience. Come and watch Harold work for a day and see how often he's making decisions that relate to tech cost, overhead, tech debt, communications, what that stack looks like. Anyway, so give us a shout at 3C. Just go to the site, connectedcouncil.org, and we'll hook you up with your member of Congress, and we'll do it virtually.
And I'm just going to, that is super crucial because 3C has done so much advocacy work here in this space. I just want to throw out one last question to the group here, just in terms of what is, if you are meeting with an elected official, there's a thing in journalism what we call burying the lead. If you get a meeting with an elected official, the last thing you want to do is bury the lead. But what should you start out with? Is there something that you should just if you have 5 minutes with them, 10 minutes with them, what do you just immediately start out with? Do you start out with your story? Do you say this needs to change? Do you start out with the problem? Just really quickly, what would be the best way to make sure that their ears perk up and they are focused on you and listening to your issue?
I try to think about what gets them reelected, and thinking about their constituents being happy is what gets them reelected, and what makes happy constituents is being able to put food on the table and taking pride in creating jobs and being able to sustain their community with their economy. So I think that I really like to try and work backwards and say, understanding that our goal here is to create a good community, and a good community thrives well when we've got political engagement, involvement from voters, and then we've got supportive and listening politicians that are going to help us get the change that we're looking for.
That is such an important note, and I want to make sure that everyone either has that written on their computers or recorded somewhere so they can listen to that over and over again. We're going to do a really quick polling of the audience. I know we're running over a little bit, but after hearing, I want to thank you all for answering all of the questions. After hearing all of these business experts and policy experts talk about this, we just have a couple questions for the community here. In terms of small businesses, do you want to be an advocate for small business? And Parker just dropped this poll into the chat. So go ahead and say yes or no, and then I can read off the results in a second. I'm thinking everyone is voting.
Yep, we've got about half of the people that have filled it out.
Okay, great. Okay. I just lost the polling results. Hold on one second. Oh, they're coming in. Okay. The numbers are coming in, everyone. This is very exciting. Okay. Overwhelmingly, we just got this results in. 79% of you had said that you want to be an advocate for small businesses. And that is key. It's super important. And obviously, as you know, as you've heard from our panelists and policy experts, it's incredibly crucial for small businesses to do this. I want to thank all of you for joining this panel. It has been so interesting to hear your stories and hear from your perspective what it's like to be a small business advocate. And I really want to thank Matt and Jake for their expertise in policy and really breaking it down, why it's so important. Again, I know I want to hand it back over to Rob at 3C to give us some closing remarks, but I want to thank you all for letting me be your host today for this fabulous webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heatha, and thank you to our outstanding panel of small businesses and policy experts for sharing your expertise and experiences with us. I agree with everyone. We could have gone on and on and on talking about policy, legislation, and advocacy. And I think this is just a great way for us to kind of get the conversation going for the new year. So to those of you who joined us virtually, thank you for taking the time to join us today as we learn more about these important issues and the significance of small business advocacy. Following this webinar this afternoon, later today, you will be receiving an email from us with a link to the recorded webinar. I know a couple of people were asking that question in the Q&A. So yes, this webinar was recorded and we will share that with you in the email. You'll also see a little bit of information about the Connected Commerce Council with a direct link to our website and learning more about how you can make your voice heard as a small business leader. And also included in that email is a link to send a letter to your elected officials, which you can also find in the Zoom chat here on right at the bottom of your screen. So if you're interested, this letter is directed to both of your state's senators and your House representative in Congress, essentially urging them to continue supporting digitally empowered small businesses like yourselves as lawmakers consider future legislation in the new Congress in the new year. So with that, if you have any questions or would like to continue the conversation, please do not hesitate to reach out to us by replying directly to the email or filling out the form on our website. Our team at the Connected Commerce Council is more than happy to connect with you as we work together to advance the interests of today's small businesses. And with that, thank you all again for joining us today, and I hope to see you all very soon. Thank you.